Now they were left with only one option. Kill. Audra yelled out directions concerning soft spots as people finally began to rush out with weapons drawn. She ran toward the front cab, which had the driver's compartment, but found she couldn't ignore the half-zombs consuming Mo. They pulled at greasy flesh, drawing out the feast. Audra knew others would falter at the sight. She raised her bat and swung down with all her might. It gave a mighty crack before the half-zom collapsed over him. Mo shook with eyes wide, but most of his body was gone. The second zom stood over him and brandished his knife against his smile. Audra didn't give him a chance. She knocked the smile off with her bat, his face contorting and his jaw dislodging. She raised her bat again. "Hello?" he called out, much to Audra's surprise. Was that a hello? He shook his head as if to cast off the stars floating in his vision. She didn't have time to decide. She swung, this time higher than his jaw. She knocked him down and swung and swung. He emitted sounds of pain, human pain. He was crying out, and Audra felt herself begin to sob as well. He was human. He wasn't a human a moment ago, but he was in this moment of death. Audra had knocked the sense into him, only for him to experience being clubbed to death in some unknown place by some unknown woman. An electrifying shiver shook through her. She thought she was going to be sick, but she couldn't. There was no time. She looked up to see people fighting the half-zoms, some successfully, some less than successfully. Blood sprays and screams seemed to meld together on the drain's stage. Audra pushed toward the cab. There was no way Lysent had planned to give them this train, filled with half-zoms or not. She needed to stop the train from returning to Lysent without any of them on board. If that happened, all of this death would be for nothing. She reached the cab and its closed door, the only closed door. Inside, the conductor messed around with the keys and buttons on the control stand. Audra guessed he was more familiar with herding zoms by horse than driving trains. Otherwise, he'd have cleared out already. Testing the bat against the window did nothing but alert the conductor, bounce back, and threaten to knock her out. Audra had enough sense to not try again. Instead, she searched the exterior of the cab. Ahead, people fought on the tracks. Safety protocols wouldn't allow the train to move with obstructions on the track. Audra had taken advantage of that protocol during her first heist. There had to be a way to manually open the doors in case of emergency. Underneath, she didn't see any levers or any eye-catching red or yellow. Getting up, she saw some of the fighting had moved away from the tracks. She didn't have much time. On the back of the cab, several panels were inlaid, but Audra couldn't reach. She stepped onto the connection between the two vehicles. The train jolted, and Audra's body fell into the back of the front car. She put her hands up to regain her balance. The train was trying to make its getaway. It lurched, and then stopped again. Her right hand fell near a bright red lever. While she couldn't tell what it was, she imagined it wouldn't help the train go on its way. Audra braced herself with her foot and pulled. It crept down with a deep grinding noise. She heard the beautiful high-tech beep, and then a gentle swoosh. She had done it. When Audra stepped inside, the man hadn't figured out he wasn't the one who had opened the doors. He frantically re-pushed the buttons he had just pushed. He looked much larger when Audra stood in the car with him. Maybe she should have called for backup. When he realized Audra had joined him, he searched the console again. This time, Audra figured for a weapon. With the bat in one hand, she pulled her blade from her holster and jettisoned it toward the grizzled man.